Sup nerds, I'm Tom. We're going to talk about the Ante expansion for Western Legends. Now you may be watching this saying, hey Tom, I just watched your Kickstarter preview video for the Blood Money expansion, and I'm pretty certain you filmed these things like back to back, because the table doesn't even really look different at all, and like, you didn't even change your shirt. That's so lazy. Okay. Up is a huge expansion that adds a lot of stuff. You can even see it adds a lot of stuff like just physically to the table. It adds a whole separate board over here. This is the Buzzard gulch board, which adds, it's like it's an extension of the map, but it's also kind of like a separate map. This little area here for Pharoah, a new game that is dumb and you should never play. And this gambler track over here with this little area here for the train. So the first thing I'll talk about with this expansion is the gambler track. So now when you win a hand of poker, you can actually gain gambler points, which advances you on this track, which does help you get, you can get legendary points and legendary tokens, and you can draw cards and stuff. And there's also a reward for being the furthest up on this track, but it's just more interesting stuff. I like the idea that, okay, when you do X, you get a reward. Instead of getting a constant reward, your reward is to advance on this track where you get varying rewards. So your rewards for doing X is different based on how many times you've done X, so to speak, right? I mean, that's just like the nature of tracks, but I think tracks work really well in a lot of games. In this game specifically, I mean, they already have the martial and the wanted track, but you can only ever be on one track at the same time. So, gambler track, more cool stuff. And there is actually a way in the rules for you to play a slightly more advanced version of poker. Like instead of just getting the flop, you can have the turn in the river, but I think there's more money you have to ante up or something. Like, actually, I looked it up and we actually decided not to play it just because it would be, like, we also looked up Pharoah too and kind of decided, not like we decided, no, we aren't going to play this game, but we kind of throughout the playing of it, we were kind of like, yeah, I guess nobody really feels the need to do that. It's just more stuff to figure out and more, it just feels more cumbersome or something. I think it's probably a good idea for people who want to play poker in this game a whole bunch. But in general, poker is just a thing you do a couple of times in this game for me, I mean, there are some characters that kind of goad you towards doing it a whole lot. But even then, I still feel like poker is something I do a couple of, like, I'm not going to just play poker the whole time. I'm going to go and I'm going to mine nuggets and I'm going to rob the train. I'm going to rob other players and I'm going to go, deposit nuggets. I'm going to come over here to the Buzzard Gulch and look at these tokens over here. Those tokens are placed on a spot that also has a number similar to it. Like this one's got a 3 and a 7, so that's a 10. This one's got a 4 and a 7, so that's an 11. So you actually pitch cards. It's important that it's cards because the first time I played this game, we actually totally ignored this because we were like, wow, you have to dump a lot of aces in order for this to even work, but you can pitch multiple cards that are equal to or greater than this number, right? So a 7 and 3s, I can pitch 1 10 or 2 5s or whatever, or a 5 and a 6. And then you get to do whatever is on the other side of this token. They're mostly going to be legendary points. So you can get, this one says 2 gold nuggets and 1 legendary point. This is 2 legendary points and refill your hand. And this is 1 longhorn and 1 legendary point. Well, Tom, what's a longhorn? That's another token I need to talk about. There's a lot of more tokens in this game. And actually, some of the tokens that you got in the original game, like the cattle tokens and the legendary tokens, they're actually bigger in this game. You got replacement tokens for those, and the other tokens are also bigger as well. Except the ones that we got in this printing are kind of printed off, or they're cut off or something. They're a little funky, which is annoying, but I'm pretty certain we're going to replace these with those poker chips anyways at some point, so I guess it's not that big of a deal. Okay, but I did bring up longhorn tokens. There are longhorns, outlaws, claim jumpers, I think, and then high rollers, which is the ones over at the poker ones. Those are all different types of like event tokens that I think they can come out in other ways too, but mostly are going to come out because of events. There's an event deck that triggers usually based off of when you have hit levels at certain tracks. So like on the legendary point track, you'll place these tokens out there, and on the martial and the wanted track and the gambler track, they'll place these little tokens out there as well. So whenever you hit these tokens, you'll draw an event, and it's mostly going to be spawning these different types of tokens. And they're mostly like NPCs, with the exception of, I guess, the Longhorn is just a specific type of cattle token. It lowers your movement by 1, but whenever you deliver it anywhere, you gain a point and $30. They're all kind of exactly the same. They're not random like the blue ones or the green ones. But these events will also be spawning out outlaw tokens, which are basically just other NPCs that you can go fight. Claim jumpers, which are, again, NPCs that you'd fight, but they mostly come over mines, which I guess was their reason to try and stop that triangle of just mining gold, depositing the gold, and then depositing the money, right? Like, there's this triangle here. I mean, I guess you could do it with the other mine over here, but it's like this spot right here is kind of, like, amazing of... I'm going to mine gold, so I'm full up on gold. I'm going to deposit those gold nuggets for $4, for 4 points each, or not each, 4 points in total, plus I think, what do you get, 20 or 30 each money? I think you get 20 per, and then when you come over here, you just dump all that money for points as well. So you have, what, you get like 7 points at least or something in that triangle in just a couple of turns. Like, that's really strong. I mean, granted, that was a problem in the base game. They're trying to fix it here a little bit. It's not like they nerfed the rules, at least, which is good. They didn't come back and say, no, this gets you $10 instead of $20 each, or you can't do that in so many turns, you know? It's not like a Magic or an LCG thing where they realized something's really powerful and then they came in and just basically said, no, don't do that anymore. Which I guess is pretty good, because what they mostly did with this expansion to address that, which I was kind of worried about, I was wondering, are they going to address that? Is, yes, I think the claim jumpers are a way to do that. I kind of almost wish there was a little bit more, maybe, because there aren't that, I mean, percentage-wise, I think this deck feels like it's mostly outlaws come out a lot. I guess claim jumpers are the second most likely thing to come out. All right, I feel like I was rambling a lot there. Getting back to the different types of tokens, what were we talking about? We have outlaw tokens, the claim jumpers, and then there are these high rollers that you actually play poker against. They'll come out to the different saloons. They'll say, I mean, all of these say, like when you go to fight them, they all say how many cards they get and what your effect is for winning. These guys, you basically play poker against them, and it says how many cards they draw for poker, and it also says what you're going to win. Like, you gain 1 gambler point and 1 gold nugget. Gain 1 gambler point and 1 item of your choice. Gain 2 gambler points and draw 1 poker card. But the big point with these tokens being NPCs, and really with most things in this expansion, is you could ultimately ignore them. Like, I actually did teach this game to new players with Ante up. It was a little rough at first. There was a couple of wrinkles. I mean, they're experienced gamers, so, I mean, they were able to mostly handle it. But, I mean, the first couple of turns, I had to re-explain a lot of things. Okay, so here are your options. Here's what you do. Here's how you get over here. But, like, a lot of the NPC tokens, like, I just kind of ignored them. Like, a lot of those tokens are on the board. I'm like, they're like, what do those tokens do? If you feel like you're gonna come in contact with them, let me know. I'll tell you what those tokens are at that point, and then you can decide if you want to do something different on your turn. But, like, a lot of these things you could ultimately ignore and still play regular Western Legends. So it's not, none of these things are modular, but they almost feel like you could treat them as modular in that way, which is maybe both good and bad. Like, I guess the issue... Okay, so like with Pharoah, right? There's this new somewhat guessing game that you play. I read the rules like once and I was like, oh, that sounds kind of dumb. And then when I was playing this with people, I said, yeah, that new thing sounds kind of dumb. We can do it if you want to. If you ever want to do it, let me know. I'll read the rules to you and I'll show you how it works, but it seems kind of dumb. And we never played it, you know? I mean, it just, you know... So I don't know if that is good or bad, right? Because what if you get this expansion and you ignore everything? And that's where I say, well, you probably wouldn't actually do that. You'd probably just ignore the things that you don't see all that interest in, right? Like, maybe if you don't really care about playing poker that much, maybe you won't really move up on the gambler track, you won't really fight the high rollers, but you'll still rob the train, which is the only other thing that's pretty big here that I didn't really talk about. At the start of your turn now, you have to move the train across the board. And the train mostly goes on the outside of the board and doesn't even really hit the left side at all. It kind of does like the bottom and then hops over to Buzzard Gulch and does 3 spots there and then goes along the top and then kind of hops back down to the bottom. But if you're in any of those spots with the train, you can rob the train, which would be another player will draw fight cards and you will just, fight it just like you fight an NPC or like you fight another player, just high card wins. But they have lots of very different, somewhat powerful rewards. So it is something that you definitely, again, it's not a new strategy of like, I'm just going to follow the train all the time and fight it a whole bunch. I mean, you could probably fight it a decent amount, but it's just another thing while you're there, go ahead and do it. Like, the issue that I have with this expansion is, sure, there's a lot of new stuff that you could ultimately ignore. And some of them are kind of incentivizing you to stop doing the things that you were doing before. So like with Buzzard Gulch and with the train, that's pushing you outside of these main towns, right? Because you would be in Red Falls or Dark Rock, especially if you're mining and stuff, you're going to be like right in the town a whole lot, right near like the center of the board. But if you want to rub the train's going to be kind of towards the outskirts. If you want to go over to Buzzard Gulch, you're near the train, and you can get all these points that are just sitting there waiting for you. And then there's the outlaw camp over there. And then, hey, while you're over there, you can probably pick up some cattle, and you can buy extra stuff with the trading post over there. So I feel like I'm kind of rambling here, and I'm aware of that. But there's a lot of stuff going on in this expansion, so there's a lot of stuff to talk about. But also, I have kind of mixed feelings on it. Like, I think I'm overall positive. I just like the idea of having more options in the game, especially like with the base game. There's already a decent amount of options. I mean, you kind of fall into doing that triangle maybe a little bit too much, but I like the idea of having so many different things I can do in that sandbox aspect. You want to be able to go and do kind of whatever you want. You could spend half the game over here in Buzzard Gulch. You could go and rob the train a whole bunch. You can jump back and forth. And I think that's the part where I have a little bit of a problem. Like, my negatives with the game is that these two things don't really mesh all that well. Some of the new things do kind of feel like new things sprinkled on top, not necessarily integrated. Like, to get over to Buzzard Gulch, you have to either spend some money when you're at the train to move from train station to train station, or you have to spend like a whole move action to go from this spot over here to this spot. I guess if you get a mount that lets you move like 4, I think the Mustang can let you go 5 if you're upgraded, like, it still feels like you're going to be taking a lot of turns just to move from this board over to that board, especially if you want to go to the trading post and there's some items over there that you really want to get or need to get or something. If you don't start over there, it's going to take you a while to get all the way over there. Now, I mean, all this to say, you should probably not play a 15-point game with Ante Up. Ante Up brings this game up so much in terms of epicness that like a 15-point game just doesn't give you the amount of time to really try everything out. Now, it's still a long game. There's still a lot of AP. I still feel like if you were to play a 25-point game with everything in it and 6 players or something, that's going to be like a whole evening. It'll be a fun evening, but that's what Western Legends has kind of become. Like, it wasn't in general a short game beforehand, but it was like you could play that plus a couple other games in an evening, right? You could play Western Legends and like maybe 2 other medium-sized games in one game night. But now with Ante Up, especially the amount of table space it takes up, it ramps it up into like an epic experience, into like, it's probably going to be the only game you're going to play that night, or maybe like the only game you want to play, because in order to get the full experience, you really want to settle in and play like a 20 or 25-point game. There are, of course, things I didn't really talk about. There's new poker cards that you add to the deck. There's new characters with their respective gold cards and everything. I mean, I didn't really talk about those, but I think that what you really wanted me to say is, do I recommend this expansion? Yes, almost absolutely, if you're a big Western Legends fan. If you want to take Western Legends, which is pretty big game, to a epic game, then yes, Ante Up is going to be an expansion that you aren't going to say, I will never play the base game again, but every time you play with it, you'll go, okay, Western Legends has really stepped it up. All right, I did a lot of ranting for this video, so I'm going to put a purchase link in the description box down below. I'm also going to put a link for Game Toppers. Go down there, subscribe so you never be bored, but boom, I'm done.